Hello everyone and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar, today sponsored by our friends over at Esri. We also appreciate the loyal geospatial community stopping by and supporting us for many years at directionsmag.com. Lots of good things for you there. We are excited to have our friend Dr. Lorraine Tai back with us. She's also brought our other friend Vinay Viswambaran, and they are going to talk to us about understanding the impacts of climate change, show off some great ways to deal with this kind of data and make great decisions. So excited to learn more today. Lorraine, welcome.
Okay, well, we welcome you to today's webinar, where Vinay and I will introduce how the ArcGIS ecosystem supports understanding the impacts of climate change on businesses using a fully web-enabled GIS. So my name is Lorraine. I am the Director of Earth Sciences Solutions in the Industry Department at Esri. I focus on geospatial technology for earth sciences applications. I'm also joined by Vinay today, who is the Principal Product Manager in Imagery Analytics, AI, here at Esri. So artificial intelligence, for those who are wondering what AI is, I'm sure there's not many. This agenda includes brief presentations and demonstrations of the tools, workflows, and resources that are helping organizations understand how a changing climate may impact their operations. We'll explore customer applications and their strategies to extract insights they needed to address climate change. The changing climate is impacting our weather, infrastructure, and economies. Understanding the causes of past and present climate change and assurance in forecasting likely future changes depend directly on our ability to understand and model the Earth system's drivers of climate change. Esri's blend of remote sensing and GIS technologies bridge the gap between big data, machine learning, and answers, providing businesses the keys that they need to address the impacts of climate change on their operations. This webinar will offer a wide lens of GIS and organizations, to see how they implement GIS to harness the value of Earth observations, to uncover insights to advance the understanding of climate change impacts on their businesses. Climate change is impacting us globally. What happens in one location happens everywhere. From declining air quality, rising sea levels, more intense natural disasters, more fluctuations in temperatures. We're getting drought in some regions, flooding in others. These changes are not limited to any one industry or region, and they pose threats throughout the supply chain, creating enormous challenges for retail, manufacturing, insurance, utilities, farmers, and beyond. Climate-related interruptions to the international flow of goods are worth roughly $20 trillion and can result in even more significant economic loss. Thus, the importance of understanding these impacts so that you can have a business that thrives. So if you think about rising sea levels in Indonesia, for example, may have a direct bearing on the sale of earbuds or computers in London or San Francisco. A new effort is afoot to navigate these disruptions among forward-looking businesses by leveraging data analytics and simulated-based location intelligence that forecast climate trends next season or decades into the future. By studying their supply chains in detail, companies quantify how resilient they are in the face of climate threats. They identify vulnerabilities, they take action to mitigate against the potential impacts and plan for future conditions. Using or understanding climate resilience draws even investors' attention. They're looking at this as an essential information to determining whether they're going to invest in a company or not. Having knowledge of their ability to be climate resilient is important. Businesses addressing the effects of climate change rely on climate risk analysis and GIS technology from Esri. Throughout today's session, you'll see a series of analysis that will start to look at trend and suitability conditions that will help your business thrive. And it all starts with data, Earth observation data. Observations taken from space take the pulse of Earth. They fuel our understanding of the impacts of a changing climate on our daily lives and businesses. Government agencies and commercial Earth observation companies provide the foundational data that serve as a critical component of decision support systems that allow for more significant insights into our changing climate. Layer by layer, these data can become a digital twin of Earth with GIS. Underpinned by location, ArcGIS provides a connective thread to these layers and a geospatial framework to unite with other curated place-based information to understand the impacts of our changing climate better. ArcGIS provides the ability to natively work with a whole diverse set of data types and formats, bringing them all together as layers within this geospatial framework. This allows you to combine and reference the multiple types of data quickly that you see here on this screen. You can bring this into apps and maps and analyze them using our vast analytical tools to gain greater insight. You will have the ability to work with many Earth observation data sets from about 30 plus satellites in a whole series of formats to be able to create this digital twin and help you better understand the Earth. And many of this data will be in multidimensional formats, and some of you may not be working in that sort of space, but looking at space and time information that Vinay will go through to give you a little bit more insight as to why this type of information is important in your analysis to better understand the impacts of climate change. In addition, many of you may not realize that Esri also provides access to a wide range of curated global climate data and other place-based content that you can find in our ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. The ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World provides data to enrich climate risk analysis for businesses across the globe. It is the foremost collection of global geographic content available. It includes thousands of data sets in GIS-ready formats, maps and apps, and authoritative sources from thousands of contributors, some of which include the National Weather Service, NASA, NOAA, USGS, and others. This evolving collection includes premium content like traffic and global spending and other demographic data to enrich multidimensional analysis. And all of this data helps you better understand the impacts of climate. As you can see here on this slide, there are a few applications, business applications that are using GIS and Earth observations to address climate change. You'll get to have resources, links to all of these stories to help you better understand this. And they'll be coming in a follow-up email tomorrow. Example suitability and trend analysis presented in these cases will also be included in our technical portion of the webinar later by Vinay. That will be coming up soon. So addressing the impacts of our changing climate begins with GIS, of course, right? So looking at how to understand an entire supply chain So with GIS technology, analysts can create smart maps, then layer climate information with hazard information and Earth observations on regions and networks that compose a business, supply chain, or operation. This insight can produce maps such as the ones that AT&T and the City of Boulder have generated to help them look for areas of vulnerability and then plan adaptation strategies so that they can create climate resiliency for their business. Armed with GIS technology and advanced analytical tools that sharpen predictions, leaders take this forecasting information to build their resiliency plans within their company. One such innovation is Seaport Simulator, developed by Atkins. This program applies predictive analysis powered by global scale simulation to historical weather data, as well as the latest meteorological research. The resulting model creates thousands of climate scenarios across GIS maps of an organization's supply line. And using these simulations, they can yield location, they can tell where areas, for example, a tropical storm or extreme temperatures may slow or disrupt the flow of shipping containers over sea and land from now all the way into 2050. So again, Vinay will be going over some of these analyses to give you a little bit of insight in how that's going to take place. And he'll be looking at some of these spatial analytical tools. So the Earth observation data combined with GIS spatial analytical tools allow businesses to gain great insight into vulnerable areas that may be impacted by changes in our climate.
All right. Now, if you're not a frequent user of multidimensional data, you may wonder how it can help you in your problem solving. It's becoming more and more vital to understand how, why, and where things are changing, not just what change has occurred. So you might be interested in using historical raster data to predict things like flood locations, or you might want to model carbon stocks over time. Either which way, you're looking to find anomalies. You're looking to explore trends, forecast or perform predictive analysis, and evaluate changes. So there are so many questions we can answer using multidimensional data. I'll go through a few examples as well, which will give you a little more insight. So what is multidimensional data? Well, many of us working in the context of a GIS, we're familiar with working with two-dimensional raster data, right? X and Y. So raster that have an X and a Y component, or a lat and a long component. Some applications, they do require the additional dimension of height, like elevation data. When we're talking about multidimensional data, we add multiple dimensions to the data. For example, there's time, height, or depth. We could also be interested in exploring more than one variable in a multidimensional data set. So for example, temperature and sea surface temperature data and precipitation. These are different kinds of variables. And as you can see, all of this is stacked as a cube of data sets or information. And that's why sometimes we refer this to as an image cube or a data cube. Now, typical examples of multidimensional data is time series optical imagery. Yes, it's probably hard to digest, but yes, satellite imagery can qualify as a time series data set as well. You can slice them up, you can put them into image cubes. So this includes land cover data sets and analytic ready data, which is being increasingly popular at this point. Ocean data like sea surface temperature, then we have weather data and data sets like soil moisture, like I mentioned previously, and precipitation. These are simple data sets that depict, there are good examples, if you may, of multidimensional data sets. Now, some of the foundational analysis that can be done are things like anomaly detection, trend analysis, predictive analysis, and time series change detection. Next, I'll just quickly dive into a demonstration just to give you an idea of the different concepts and give you kind of a conceptual overview of multidimensional capabilities within ArcGIS. So first, I'll just talk about the data model, how you can access a multidimensional data within ArcGIS. It's pretty straightforward, just like every other data set. You can head over to the Add Data dialog. You can import multiple variables. So here's a netcdf file. There are different formats that support multidimensional data sets. So here, like I said, each data set contains multiple variables. So I can pick the variables of interest to me and add it to my map. Once added, this is what it looks like. And this is just sea surface temperature in this case. And I can now pick, explore, or probe different variables that are available with this data set. So I'll stick to water temperature in this case. And in addition to multiple variables, this specific data set has the dimension of time. So it's an annual data set, and I have access to different time periods. I could quickly slice or jump through different time periods and explore my imagery. In addition to this, since it's the sea surface temperature, I have access to the sea surface temperature at different heights. So this is the second dimension that I can explore. I can step through each one of the heights or each one of the different slices easily right through my map. Right, so in a matter of clicks, 3 clicks in this case, I could slice and dice my data set and work with my multidimensional data. So that was a quick visualization of the data that you can perform on multidimensional data and how you can bring this data set. And that was kind of an overview of the data model as well. Now for some of the analysis that is possible. Here's another data set, sea surface temperature again, but it's 35 years worth of data, and it is monthly data that we have. You can see it's 1980, it goes on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it goes on monthly, all the way right up to 2015. Now, this data can be dense for many kinds of analysis, right? So we have a series of tools, the first being aggregate, and the analysis that I want to do in this case is simply take in my data set based on this dimension of time. I want to aggregate my data and create an annual aggregate of the data. So basically what's happening is this dense data set that contains 435 slices approximately of slices of imagery, it's condensing it now to actually make it just annual data sets. So I have everything. I have about 35 different slices. It's brought it down from 435 to 35. So really, depending on your type of analysis, you can condense your data sets, you can aggregate your data sets, and this just makes analysis a lot more simpler. Next is I can take this a step further and identify anomalies. So I can take the same data set internally, and I can look at the difference from mean for each slice. So here's what my anomaly data set looks like. And if I query any pixel, I can pick a year. So for example, 2002, I can query a pixel, and what it shows me is how much does the pixel value deviate from the mean for the entire stack of imagery, right? So it's useful for anomaly detection over time. Again, I can step through this, and it gives me easy visualization of anomalies over different locations. Now, in addition to visualizing the map, we have certain charting capabilities as well. So I can quickly perform a temporal profile and identify how we have temporal changes over any given spot. And here you can see a little spike in this region. So picking a pixel over there, poking a pixel there, you'll see there are 2 spikes. One is 1983 and 1998. And these, as you're probably aware, is the El Nino years. So it's a clear indication, it gives you a clear understanding of the different phenomena, environmental phenomena, purely by just exploring these data sets. And these wild oscillating patterns are primarily due to seasonality. We can pick another another point, and we can explore trends next. And you can see right here, there's a gradual increase in trend over time. Although it's subtle, but you can see the temperature increasing over time. Next is trend analysis and predictive analysis. Many a time, especially when it comes to climate change, understanding climate change, you want to foresee what things would look like or what kind of areas are susceptible to certain kinds of damage, or areas that are suitable for growing certain types of crop, for example, right? So you want to perform trend analysis, you want to perform predictive analysis, and we've got a suite of tools that will enable us to do that. Here's the same sea surface temperature data set, and I can invoke the trend analysis tool. Running the harmonic regression accounts for cyclical patterns and seasonality. And here's the result: a trend raster, which in general gives me an understanding of increasing temperature over time in purple, and everything in green is decreasing temperature over time. Using this trend data set, we can now perform predictive analysis, or rather create a data set that predicts itself all the way out to 2030. So I've used that input trend raster. Here's my output multidimensional data. I can specify my interval by providing a start date and an end date. In this case, I used 2030 to be my end date. Now, in the interest of time, I pre-generated my results, both the trend and the predicted layer. And this is what it looks like. Here as well, we can step through time. It started from 1980, so we've gone back 5 years, and you'll notice I've taken this all the way to 2030. So this is just a quick conceptual overview of the data model and the tools that are available. I thought I'd show you this before I get into actual use cases.
Thank you so much.
All right. Over to you, Lorraine.
Okay. What Vinay just showed you, given that half of you are not incorporating GIS just yet, you might be thinking, oh my goodness, this seems really great. I'd like to perform this kind of analysis, but also I don't know where to start. So one of the resources that will be available to you in the follow-up email will be this GIS for Climate hub site that we have put together. This site has all kinds of resources, training, learn lessons, use cases, data sets to get you started and to perform advanced workflows that will help mitigate climate risk. Also, this whole list of resources, I know that's a horrible slide because there's a lot of links here, but I just wanted to give you an insight into a series of business cases that are applying multidimensional analysis and risk assessment to their business to ensure that they can address impacting climate changes. And so these resources as well will be available to you. And each of them are only a couple of pages, 1 to 2 pages to read, and they'll give you a full breadth and depth of their strategy utilized to help address climate change.
So I've got a few demonstrations of use cases where we've used some of these multidimensional data sets and multidimensional analysis tools to understand climate impacts. So observe, climate change is impacting food security because of rising temperatures, and we need advanced analytical tools to help agricultural experts understand more about biological processes in plants and their response to rising temperatures. And these tools essentially are the tools that I'd shown you. So they're just some of the tools that I'd shown you, in the previous example. So the next example is where we're using multidimensional analysis to understand the effects of climate change, more specifically on grape production. This example, I'll talk a little bit about climatic impacts, And although grapes, it can grow in a wide range of climates, the highest quality wine requires a delicate balance of minimum, maximum, and extreme temperatures. The rising temperature shifts, the crop conditions, and all of this put together, it can cause plant hardiness. Growing degree days is a measure of the total amount of heat that is accumulated during a season, during a growing season. And this is considered to be generally a good indicator of plant growth. So for our analysis, we use two weather variables from the multidimensional DayMet data set. It provides you with daily minimum and daily maximum temperatures over 35 years. And then we created this yearly GDD map. And next we created the GDD anomaly map of 2018, again, using those, the anomaly analysis tools that I just shown you in the previous example. And then here, using our charts, we see positive anomalies across the whole United States. And querying a couple points across the landscape, you can see the temporal profiles indicate a dramatic increase in temperature over the two locations. Next, we took our analysis a step further and we created this yearly suitability map for grapes based on the calculated GDD. And we found the suitability regions for different grapes. And you can see that it varies dynamically from year to year. So there's not constant, change or as we're moving from one year to another. So it's an interesting example that shows how the changing temperature and growing degree days will affect grape and premium quality production, premium quality wine production year over year. Now, climate is clearly important to the viability and success of the wine industry worldwide. By developing an operations Central GIS, we can integrate essential data from a variety of sources, and we can eliminate a large portion of the tedious time-consuming processes that previously made major impacts on our operational efficiency. Now, here's where GIS is really used to manage data, such as data sets like ground moisture content, then the presence of harmful insects and mildew, and the status of specially cultivated rows. ArcGIS essentially aids in harvest analysis, the selection of prospective planting sites, in-field data collection, and determining irrigation requirements. So there's a lot of actionable insights you can derive from the analysis that we've done. You have broad access to the GIS platform, and it really ensures that everyone within the organization is on the same page. You have access to a single portal. You have access to a series of dashboards, operation dashboards, which will enable you to make informed decisions. Next, another example where we will be taking in different kinds of geospatial data to derive suitability for crop yield. So it's not a single, like the previous data set, we use sea surface temperature. Here we're going to use multiple data sets. So the previous example essentially was an example of grape growth based on time series temperature data. Now, here's an example of determining vineyard suitability areas based on various environment and landscape layers. I'll tell you a little more about those data sets. So the inputs to the analysis are 4 landscape layers. So we've got soils. This gives you information about the different types of soils and soil moisture content. Then we've got land cover. That's important to understand because, and when I say land cover, I mean the National Land Cover data set. It's important to understand because it gives you clear understanding of the types of, land cover, such as if you have barren land or if you have urban areas. These obviously, right off the bat, it gives you an indication it's not a good location to plant vineyards. So you can use that when you're performing weighted sum and eliminate those areas in your calculation. Then I've used the cropland data set, which gives a brief idea of different types of crops that are grown in different parts of the country. And lastly, we've used elevation derivatives. You might ask, how is it important? Well, vineyards, it's most susceptible to grow successfully where you don't have too much of a slope. Aspect is important because that's where you see the direction of the wind, right? So once we had all of these data sets, we put them together, mashed them together into ArcGIS Pro. We created a suitability analysis raster function chain. Basically, we took a bunch of image processing algorithms, chained them together into a raster function chain. A raster function chain enables you to perform on-the-fly image processing and image analysis. The chain took in all of these data sets and essentially performed a weighted sum. The result, here's our suitability map. The yellows indicated areas that are moderately suitable for vineyards, and the greens indicated optimal suitability regions. Now, this is just the Santa Rosa County, and you can see Napa Valley as well in this region. So it's not all of the United States. This is just one of the areas that I picked. The regions in purple is what I'd extracted from the cropland data set. So we used that to perform our analysis, and we did a further analysis just to see if the system, or if the farmers, or if the organizations had made right decisions in planting vineyards in those locations. And as you can see on the left, the legend indicates existing vineyards, the low suitability range, medium suitability range, and high. And you can see most of these vineyards are either within the medium suitability and high suitability. Air quality has a direct impact on human health. Here's another scenario where we use multidimensional tools and data sets to understand air pollution trends. This, in turn, it helps us identify regions we need to focus on to take preventive measures to improve air quality. The PM 2.5 data set, or the particulate matter 2.5 data set, it is an important indicator of air quality. And we wanted to find out the regions where PM 2.5 level exceeds the World Health Organization guidelines. So we used the PM 2.5 data set that was created by NASA CDAC. And this essentially is a yearly average from 1998 to 2016. And this is the data set that we use for analysis. So the first product that we could derive, this is the maximum PM 2.5 over 19 years that we generated using the aggregate multidimensional tool. The WHO guideline for health is to keep PM 2.5 under 10 micrograms per cubic meter on an average year, on average every year. But we see many regions exceeded this guideline in the past 19 years. Second, this is a trend map we generated where the greens in the Southeast United States and some European countries show decreased trends, while the increasing PM 2.5 trend shows as dark purple in Asia and Africa. So these are clear indicators which give you, which will enable you to perform, to make informed decisions based on these actionable insights. The third derivative product we created was a frequency map that was generated using raster functions again, and the aggregate tool. This provides both the spatial and the temporal views of the PM 2.5 data. In red, we see regions that most frequently exceeded the WHO guideline. And these were all visualizations and analyses products. These three products that I just showed you, they were all visualization and analysis products we could generate using our multidimensional tools. And you could see how all of this was really instrumental in understanding climate change. And again, like I said, once you have this kind of information, it just makes it a lot more easier to enrich features or feature classes that cover certain regions or counties, you can enrich those data sets and make informed decisions. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lorraine.
There. Okay. Well, we hope that you got some great insight in terms of what types of analysis and data can be utilized to understand climate impacts. For those of you who are already working in this field, I wanted to announce, before we move into the Q&A session, announce that we will be having an Esri Ocean Weather and GIS, or Climate GIS Forum, complimentary in November 3rd to the 4th. And the opportunity for you to present your work is available now. If you go to this site, we'll be providing a link to submit abstracts for lightning talks that could be presented at this 2-day event. So we encourage you to do that. So in today's webinar, we have provided an overview of ArcGIS, a fully web-enabled GIS supporting businesses in their efforts to address climate change impacts on their operations. We have presented a wide lens of how GIS and organizations harness the value of Earth observations and GIS technology to uncover insights that will make their business thrive. The customer applications and their strategies to extract the needed insights are offered as resources for you to learn more. I showed you those earlier, and keep in mind you will be getting those in a follow-up email tomorrow to further enhance your knowledge. You also saw how ArcGIS could seamlessly connect to a large variety of data sources to conduct suitability and trend analysis to address the impacts of climate change. We will open it up now to answer your questions. There are a few that have come in through the chat, and we'll get to those, and then I'll turn it over to Barbary to take us home. Okay, so let's see. One of the questions, do you need, I chuckle at this one because I thought about this too. Do you need a supercomputer for trend analysis on a global scale? So I'll turn that one over to Vinay. What do you think, Vinay? Do you need a supercomputer?
No, not really. In today's day and age where you have the cloud and you have cloud compute that is available for you, you can spin up AWS instances or Azure instances as and when required. Now, ArcGIS has ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online, which does all of the analysis for you, and it does the scaling up and scaling down of instances as and when required. Likewise, ArcGIS Enterprise is an on-premise deployment of ArcGIS, which enables you to scale your earth science, right? So really, you don't have to worry about the infrastructure. You just have to worry about the science. You bring your data, throw it onto our online services, and kick off your processing irrespective of the scale. The system will scale and serve out your results.
Okay, sounds good. Now, what level of GIS expertise is required to perform some of the multidimensional analysis that you showed us here today?
That is a good question. Now, multidimensional, I'm constantly asked this question. One is multidimensional analysis, and the other one is deep learning. There's a lot of work that's involved. I mean, is this designed for the scientist? But then what I just showed you was an ArcGIS Pro. You know, there were a series of tools. You just pick these tools without writing any code. You can just pick these tools, pick a few parameters, and you can tell the system, hey, I want to aggregate my data. And this is daily data aggregated to annual data. Click of a button, it does it for you. Or you can say identify anomalies for you, anomalies for me, and based on a given region. It does the anomaly detection for me. The next is I want to identify trends, or I want to predict the sea surface temperature data. These are all examples that I just did, and I'm highlighting them again because I've shown it to you. It was really easy to run, and in online we've made it even more simpler. We've made it even more easier. You just bring your data, pull in your data as a layer into online, invoke the same tools, and it creates the output directly into your portal. So it's a layer which you do not even need to publish. The system will do everything for you, and you can just consume the layer directly. Same with deep learning. We've got tools which will enable you to just pick an image and pick a bunch of training samples, and you tell the system, go train a model for me. And depending, obviously, the quality of the training samples, it trains a model, it runs inferencing, and it derives information products for you. We've really simplified things. We've enabled developers for both multidimensional analysis, deep learning, and other kinds of analysis like hydrological modeling and so on. We have APIs in ArcGIS which will enable developers to write code and perform this kind of analysis. Then we've enabled GIS analysts and image analysts to perform the same kind of analysis simply using out-of-the-box tools. You just fill in a few parameters and there you have your answers.
Thanks, Vinay. And this one follows on to that a little bit. I'll answer it a bit and then you can chime in. Are there training I could access to learn more about how to apply these types of analysis to my business? And I just wanted to make reference to that GIS Climate Hub that I talked about earlier. You will have a link to that hub site, which has a whole range of learn lessons, and applications that could help you get started. So what do you think, Vinay?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think you'd shown a resources slide as well. Then we do have a workflows website. So if you simply search Imagery Workflows ArcGIS, we have a complete section on multidimensional analysis. And there's another section on multidimensional data management that gives you access to a whole bunch of resources. There's learn lessons, there's, step by step, we tell you this is exactly how we did this process, including some of the demos that I showed you here today. Then we should give you access to blogs, there are videos, there's documentation, there's access to everything in there.
Exactly, and that kind of resources will help a beginner all the way to an advanced person. So it will range in a series of levels. So the next question is about, is satellite imagery and sensing typically the only data capture methodology required to analyze climate change and address climate change use cases? Are there any incremental analysis unlocked by using aircraft to capture higher resolution oblique imagery? Vinay, did you get all of that?
Yeah. It's really different kinds of imagery is used to solve different kinds of problems. Now, for climate change, you obviously need more than the pure red, green, blue imagery values that are being returned, or the intensity values that are being returned. There is a bunch of imagery that we've made available on the Living Atlas. This includes soil data, wind data, oceans data, there's precipitation data. There are about more than 50 different layers which are instrumental in understanding climate change. And that is where these kinds of layers play a significant role to understand climate change, because it gives you much more than just red, green, blue pixel values. Oblique imagery has got its own value, right, in the industry or in several applications. It's used for damage assessment, for example, for insurance purposes, for public safety, and for reviewing data sets or disaster management. But not necessarily, I wouldn't say aerial imagery is necessarily used for understanding climate change. Now, you could do things like extraction of features which will complement your climate change analysis. This kind of imagery, as you're probably aware, is used heavily for deep learning. So you can extract features like trees or damaged structures, and then use that and complement your existing data sets that I just talked about to fortify the results of your climate change analysis.
Yeah, and also if you even think about retail type or commercial type businesses, having local knowledge of what is going on in their area. There's all kinds of data layers within the Living Atlas that can supply that type of information. The demographic data that is local to a particular region, that can all augment your analysis. So the ability to blend in both local data all the way to space data is available to you in the geospatial framework. So the next question is about farmers, Vinay. So farmers have already selected the suitable areas. So how does this analysis help them?
Yeah, I just saw that question come through. And quickly, Barbara, if you could let me share my screen. I think this in itself should give you an understanding of why this would be important. Now here, I just picked a point, and you'd see similar patterns, if you pick winds or if you pick soil content. Over time, this is what the data looks like, right? We're going all the way from 1998 to 2015. Cyclical patterns, they indicate seasonality, and you can see the temperature changes over time. Now, what's interesting is drawing a trend line. You'll see the temperature is only increasing. So the question there was, although farmers do have areas that they've identified already that are optimum for farming locations. So how does this analysis help them? As you can see, things are only changing over time. Environmental factors are affecting, or climate is heavily impacting all of these environmental factors, like the soils, the sea level rise, and the sea surface temperature, the precipitation, and so on and so forth. So these locations, these suitable locations, which were identified to be apt 20 years ago, are very quickly going to be out of date. There are different locations which would probably be more apt. And this also changes with technology. As technology evolves, the certain types of technology to increase your crop growth will warrant different types of environmental factors. So you have to weigh in those factors to identify locations that are probably more suitable to grow certain types of crops. So yeah, it is always advantageous for farmers to continually monitor regions, how they're changing, and how it could be affected down the line. Like I said, we perform predictive analysis as well. So it gives me an understanding 30 years down the line, how are things going to change? How could things potentially change? So it can help me anticipate changes, or if I need to move certain types of crop, I know what to do and anticipate business decisions.
Yes, and Vinay, if you think about AT&T, who were using suitability and predictive analysis to look at their cell phone tower infrastructure, which, the cell phone towers would already be in place. And so what they would be using predictive analysis to do is to understand which of those cell towers may be affected by a tropical storm, for example. And once they know which areas are susceptible, then they would start to plan how to reinforce those areas. So, the predictive analysis really comes into play here. We're coming up on time. I think we could do one more question, and then we'll hand it over to Barbara. So this is to you, Vinay. Which of the data is federal open source data? Well, first, I'll just make a note on that, and then I'll let Vinay answer as well based on his analysis. But we have a Earth Sciences newsletter that is going out today, because we have a whole series of the federal data sets that have just been released as open source, and we're providing those through ArcGIS Online as well. But within the analysis that you were presenting today, Vinay, can you comment on that question?
Yeah, so I think Lorraine has just answered that question, because she's got access to the best data sets, definitely, which she's going to announce today. In addition to that, if you get onto the Copernicus data website, they give you access to most of the data sets that I just told you. shown you today. In addition to that, on the Living Atlas, we've made a ton of data that is accessible. You can access them as services directly through ArcGIS. Optionally, if you click on the data source, it gives you links to the data sources so that you can download the imagery and work with it locally as well. Now, you have to keep in mind a lot of these data providers, they store their data sets potentially as request of payee data sets that are available. They're zipped and stored on cloud stores. So you'll have to unzip those data sets and then create services and process the data sets so that you can make it into a user. You can convert it into usable state. So yeah, those are multiple locations that I would look at to download data.
Okay, before I turn it over to Barbara, I do see there's a lot more questions coming in. Some of them are to do with training. I'm a beginner. Where can I learn more? I want to be able to perform this analysis. What data sets do I use for coastal flooding? So as I said earlier, through the GIS Climate Hub, there's all kinds of training resources there. So there are learn lessons really available that range in time from 30 minutes to a half a day, for example, that will allow you to play with the software, perform an analysis, and you'll get to see all different types of climate type analysis or multidimensional analysis. So please do check out those resources that Barbara will be sending in the follow-up email tomorrow. And I think that's all the time we have, right, Barbara? So over to you to take us home.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, Lorraine and Vinay, for sharing your talents and all this great information. Just remember to keep an eye on your inbox. Our recording will be archived for you, and you'll get an email with the link as long as you open that up and click over to your attendance certificate as well. We appreciate your input on our brief survey and hope that you make it a great day and tell a friend about Esri and Directions Magazine. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.